Parmenter. Welcome, Nikki.
Thank you. It's nice to see all of you and that you've given it your evening to listen. I'm going to start the screen share and I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation first. So if I just switch this to slideshow from beginning, if I can get that to work. Right, okay. So I don't know if any of you know anything about me. I'm just going to minimize this picture at the side. Okay, I'm actually based in Cheshire in Poynton, which is near Macclesfield. I'm an ex-art teacher. I taught at my local secondary school, Poynton High School, for 30 years and left there in 2016. And since then, I've been pursuing textile workshops. I've been doing a lot of teaching. I've been writing magazine articles. I've been exhibiting and generally having a great time. And it's lovely to be invited by teachers to work with their students, particularly in the art textiles field. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about some of the different ways or techniques that I use for my work. And I'm going to talk about 3 different techniques, but I'm going to focus on one in particular, which is relevant to the course that is going to be running on the 2nd of March. So this is the first technique I wanted to show to you. And I'm very keen on doing lots of layering, using lots of different materials and free machine embroidery. And this is a technique which evolved over time. I'm sure other people do this, but it's a technique that I didn't invent it, but I kind of came upon it and developed it in my own way. And this is a project or a technique which uses a lot of plastic PVC. So you can buy plastic PVC by the metre, and it's quite thick but very flexible. And it's the sort of material that you would use as a table covering. So you would find it in your local fabric shop where PVC table coverings are. So what you're seeing here is a project that was in Stitch magazine, which is connected to the Embroiderers Guild. And I've called it Bird and Spring Flowers Cameo. And first of all, I did a drawing based on Victorian jewellery. And this is based on a Victorian scrap. Victorian scraps were very popular. People used to collect them and literally put them in scrapbooks or make pictures from them or put them on screens. They're quite nostalgic, very, very colourful. So I drew the bird in the middle of this oval and then added a decoration around the edge to make it look like a brooch. And then took a piece of PVC. This is A3 size, by the way. Took a piece of PVC just a little bit larger than the bird, and then pinned it onto the top and then traced round it. In this instance, I've used a biro, but I've discovered subsequently that a Sharpie pen is far better because you can then trace all of the detail with quite a degree of accuracy. In the next image, what you're seeing is a piece that's part stitched. So in this top left image here, you're seeing a series of layers. There are actually 3 or 4 layers. So the base layer is a piece of plain PVC. On top of that, I've put pieces of iridescent cellophane, which you can see shimmering through there. This is from Amazon. This is iridescent blue and pinky green. Then on top of that, I've pinned the traced template or the traced piece of PVC, pinned it all together, and then started to free machine stitch all around the edges. So on this, you're seeing the first layer of the stitching. And here I've started to add some coloured thread to literally thread paint the bird. I'm very keen on doing my own drawings. I always try to do that if possible. But obviously, if students can't do that, then you can always print something out for them to trace from with this particular technique. You can see on here, there's a finished bird and the wing is actually separate from the body. So it is actually padded. It is in light relief. And I always use a safety eye if it's appropriate because it just adds that little bit more realism. Also on the cameo, there were some flowers, and another material that I use quite a lot is funky foam, which is quite a clunky material. It's quite a kind of, it can be quite thick and difficult, you know, in terms of, you know, what can I do with this? How can I actually make this a bit more subtle? But what you can do with it is you can cut it into all sorts of different shapes and sizes. You can layer it. So in this instance here, I've used some funky foam to create the centers of the flowers, and I put some split pins through them. And you can also incise into it with a pen or with a compass point, and then you can paint it, you can stitch it, you can cut it, and you can add biro onto it. So it's a very useful material to use if you're making some kind of environment and you want flowers or leaves and that type of thing. So the next image shows you the two finished pieces that I prepared. As I said, I think earlier, they're both A3 in size. They are padded, so they're perhaps about a couple of inches away from the wall surface. And you can see how effective the funky foam is in creating quite an organic effect. So the secret is not to stick them down flat, but to stick them so that they're just slightly raised from the surface. So in this instance, I've pinned or glued the flower down in the middle, and then just put a little bit of glue around the edges, and then just push the petals forward to make them look a little bit more realistic. The edges are made from funky foam again, and I've put some gold leaf on here to make them look a little bit like a Victorian pinchbeck effect. It's interesting too that different colour schemes give you a completely different feel. I tend to go for lots of oranges and blues. So for this particular project, I thought I would try something that was a little bit different for those people who might like something a bit more subtle. And I actually do prefer the one which is a little bit more muted. So I'd like to show you another example. I think somebody might not be on mute with the microphone. I just wonder if you've got your microphone on, if you could switch it off. Thank you, that's brilliant. Okay. This is another free machine embroidery using the PVC technique. And this was featured in a book called Wow Book. I don't know if you've heard of the Maggie Gray Wow Book series. She used to do workshops on the web, which were literally published online, but now she makes a physical book with all sorts of projects in it. And this was quite tricky because I had to keep sending this to London. This was during lockdown. I had to send it to London and then it was sent back, and I had to keep adding more and sending it to and fro because it had to be professionally photographed as the project went along. But this one, again, is an A3 size, and it shows you the flexibility of this fabric technique. So I did the drawing of the tulips first of all. This is, as I say, A3. Traced it again onto the plastic as before. And then in the middle, I've put lots of beautiful iridescent blue cellophanes and the more clear cellophanes that I showed you earlier. Also some dotty cellophane paper and some shiny paper, which I think was from Paper Chase. And then I free machine stitched it. So the secret with this is to make sure that you don't overstitch it, because you want some of that shimmer to come through. So this can be displayed in a number of different ways, and it's very, very flexible. There's lots of different things you can do with this. So in this instance, you can hang the finished piece on the wall, and the white of the wall will show through if you've got a white painted wall. If you hang it in the window, it looks very, very similar to stained glass, because the window, the light will shine through all this beautiful iridescence that you get with the cellophane. Or as you can see on the left-hand side, I curved it around into a column and then put a bottle of, an empty plastic bottle in it, and then displayed flowers in it. So you can use this to make a kind of a lampshade or column vase shapes. And the extra bit of bling on here, which you can perhaps just about see, as I added some little lights. So these were from Amazon. It's just a string of LEDs, and it's surprising what a difference it makes. And it always engages the students if you say, we're going to put lights on this. So it's really quite an interesting addition. So that's the plastic. The next thing I wanted to show you is another technique that I use quite often. I'm not quite sure why there's a blue line over there. I must have done that by mistake, so apologies for that. This is just part of a larger piece that I'm going to show you in a minute. And what I really like to do is this technique whereby I draw with biro onto calico, just, unbleached calico. And then I add paint to it. So this is a hoopoo. Then what I do is iron on some interfacing on the back to stabilize the fabric. And then that's free machine embroidered. So you can see here, this is the biro technique. And then on this side, this is all machine stitched using free machine embroidery on the calico. And this was for a very large set of work. It was for a triptych that I produced, which went into Chester Cathedral. I like narrative pieces. So the triptych told the story of a white swan that travelled from one image to the next and then to the third image. And the piece you're seeing here, this is actually the second image. So you can see on here that there is the hoopoo, and these birds have been done with both the plastic technique, which this parrot has been produced in, and also the technique of drawing onto calico. So the birds here, this one is drawn, as is this mallard down here, and the swan is also drawn onto calico and then free machine stitched. So this is the final triptych. So this is in Chester Cathedral. This is the chapter house in the cathedral. And the story is, well, the triptych is called The White Swan. And the story starts here in an Irish pond. It's based on a poem by W.B. Yeats called The White Swan. And the white swan flies from this painting into the next image here, which is called The Conference of the Birds. And this is based on an epic 12th century Persian poem. And all of the birds are going on a journey led by the hoopoo, and they're going to find a mythical bird called the simorgh, which you can see in this picture here. So as I say, I am very keen that there's some kind of context, that it's not just a picture of, you know, a flower or a tree, that there's hopefully some kind of story behind it. So this one is 8 feet by 4 feet, and these two are 5 feet by 5 feet. So the swan has flown from here into this 12th century Persian piece, and then it's flown from there, and you can just see here where the birds actually meet this mythical creature called the simorgh. So that's quite a bit about the two different fused, the PVC and the drawing on calico. The third one I want to show you, I'm really sorry that there's a blue line across the image here, which I hadn't realised was there, so I do apologise for that. The third technique I want to talk to you about is the focus of the workshop that I'm running on the 2nd of March, and it involves fusing fabric. I'm very keen on looking around to see what's going on in terms of different techniques and different materials. And I found this book, which I'm sure you might know, which is called Fusing Fabric by Margaret Beale. And this is what I'm going to be demonstrating to you shortly. Now, I've got some examples of finished work by participants in workshops, and I'm pretty certain that this one was done by an adult at an Embroiderers Guild summer school. And all of the leaves here and the flowers and the butterfly are made using this fused fabric technique, which involves layering felt fabrics and netting together and soldering, which I will explain to you in a minute. This image is mainly produced using the fused fabric technique. So again, this was for a specific venue. This piece was shown somewhere called, I can't remember the name of it, sorry, Gawthorpe Hall in Lancashire. And Gawthorpe Hall has a very well-known textiles collection. They've got, I think, as many pieces as the V&A has, but they're not all on display. They're all catalogued in various places. So the lady who used to live at Gawthorpe Hall, a lady called Rachel K. Shuttleworth, collected all this vast number of textiles. And I had an exhibition there in 2019, 2020. And because I was exhibiting in that particular venue, I decided I would make some pieces specific to that, to the work that was on display there. So I had a visit where I went to do a kind of field trip, took lots of images, and this particular piece here, you can see on the edge here of this obelisk, it was based on a crewel work bedspread and canopy, which I noticed, and the parrot and the squirrel and the flowers were all featured on this particular canopy. So the background of this piece here is...
Alice, do you want some water? Drink it.
the background of the piece is produced using the fused fabric, and then the squirrel and the parrot are both drawn onto calico and then free machine embroidered. I don't know if you recognise this. This was the inspiration for the piece here. So this is called a tulipiere, and they are very frequently found in stately homes, places like Chatsworth House, you know, grand houses. And they first originated in Holland in the 16th century, when there was a real explosion of purchasing of tulip bulbs. It was called tulip mania. And people used to show off their wealth by displaying their tulip bulbs in these little spouts here. I think the tulips could cost in excess of several months' wages. It's a complete bizarre phenomenon. And then subsequently the bubble burst and people lost a lot of money, but it was called, as I say, tulip mania. So I produced this piece, which was inspired by the structure of the tulipiere, and this was on display at Gawthorpe Hall. It's about 6-7 feet in height. So to get to the very top, to put the parrot on the top, you have to actually climb up on a step ladder. Fortunately, my husband is very good at DIY. He actually trained as a sculptor, so he's very helpful if I've got to make some kind of a structure, or rather he made the structure. I mustn't claim that I've done that. He made these series of boxes. So there are 6 boxes which decrease in size as you get higher to the top. So they all come apart and they stack together like Russian dolls. So on each of the 2 facets that you see here, these were based on images that I was inspired by at Gawthorpe Hall. Around the other side, there are images which are based on flowers. So I've got Ophelia on there. I've got a haiku which talks about cherry blossom. So again, it's investigating flowers across different cultures and putting those into this particular structure. I wanted to do a bit of recycling and upcycling. So the tulip vases here are made from plastic bottles, and all of the flowers are made using the bases of bottles, yogurt pots, plastic milk bottle cartons, etc. And on the top, there is a parrot perched on the top there. So this is another piece using the fused fabric technique. This is one of the early ones that I produced, and this is relatively small. I would say it's only just about A4 in size, so it is quite a tiny one. But you can see in the background, I've used this fused fabric, which, as I say, is a layer of felt and fabrics and then netting on the top. And that's created both the background and also some of the fishes here and the peacock here. Also, these flowers are made using the fused fabric technique. Again, you can see funky foam, which I use, as I say, an awful lot. So these are just cut out. They're really quite small, probably only about 1 centimetre in size, but they have again been painted and decorated with biro to create that kind of leaf effect with a lot of strong contrast. And the little frog, he's larger than, he's smaller than that in real life. He's been made using some padding, some wadding that's been wrapped around and round. And then I've used embroidery thread to create the texture. And the legs are made from pipe cleaners, which have been bent around and again wrapped. This has got lots of hand embellishing as well on here. It's an Adam and Eve piece. So these are 2 medieval figures that I found at a medieval illuminated manuscript. And this was before I discovered the PVC. So what I did for this one was did the drawing on paper and then photocopied it onto acetate. So I got then a black outline on a clear surface. And this has been stitched onto the background and then painted with acrylic. So lots of different techniques. So this was, as I say, quite an early piece. So this was a way of incorporating drawing into the textiles, which subsequently developed into the PVC technique. So this is another one. This is based on Sandro Botticelli. It's probably a bit larger than A1 in size. And this one, you can see there are different elements from Botticelli images. So this is spring here, this is Primavera. There's the goddess Flora at the bottom. And here's Botticelli's Birth of Venus. So she's there being born from the seashell. So this is still the stage where I was using the acetate and the drawings to create the drawn effect, if you like. but there's a lot of fused fabric in the background here. You can see these are made from the fused fabric, and there's a lot of embellishing with sequins and beads, etc. I seem to like swans. They keep cropping up in lots of different images. And then this is another piece using a lot of fused fabric, and this was actually on display at an exhibition at the Wirral Art Gallery in Birkenhead. I don't know if any of you have actually been there. It's a fantastic gallery, and it has a collection of pottery by the factory called Della Robbia. Della Robbia first originated in Florence in the 15th century, and then it was subsequently rediscovered, and a factory was built and operated in Birkenhead. I think it was 1894 to 1906, something like that. And they used the same principles that the Florentine factory had used. So they used very similar colour schemes, very similar imagery. And this is my piece, which is called La Fontana. And it's based on a water fountain. So I don't know if you can see, I suspect that if I just move that up, so this is a water fountain here. And this is actually a basket that you would put on a wall and put flowers in. So this juts out, and then the sides have been decorated with the fused fabrics. And I've got lots of little frogs in there. I've got little lizards, which have been made in the same way as the frog in the Adam and Eve piece. Quite often the Della Robbia images include lots of floral motifs in a kind of swags of flowers. So I've tried to recreate those again using the funky foam, and in this instance I've used lots of little beads, and they actually were Christmas decorations that I cut apart and painted to create the oranges. And then this little Lamb of God here is completely stitched using the fused fabric technique. So I've just got a few examples from workshops to show you now. So that's going to move. I think I need to move this back down again. Just bear with me a second. Right, why is that one not wanting to move? Right, okay. So these are some examples of work produced in workshops. So some are by adults and some are by students. This particular one here, bottom right, this was done by a teacher on a workshop which we held in Rochdale just pre-COVID. And we've used the fused fabric to create the seahorse. And then we've used funky foam to create the decorations around the edge. And we've also got a ring here, a wire ring as a base, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. These are also fused fabric here, the fishes. I think these were done by adults in a workshop, as were these here. And this frog was a Zoom workshop, and that was produced using the PVC technique. So I use these wire rings an awful lot for displaying this project, which I call Small Worlds, using the fused fabric. And these I actually purchased from a garden centre. I buy them in bulk because I use a lot of them, but they're incredibly useful. The ones that I tend to use for workshops are usually 10 inches across. And you can see that it's a double ring of copper, and you can do all sorts with these. So you can wrap them with fabrics, with threads. You can crisscross over them to make them look like a spider's web. But essentially, you're creating an environment for your piece, your creature to live in, because the workshop I'm going to be providing, as I say, is called Small Worlds, and you would be able to choose from some kind of a template of a fish, a frog, elephant, seahorse, got various templates, and you'll be choosing that and then making an environment, a small world for your piece to go into. These are some other examples of fused fabrics. So you can see it's very versatile. So here we've got some more butterflies. This is a lovely one, actually. This is beautifully stitched, and you can see the size compared to the frame. Another frog here. I'm going to be demonstrating the frog shortly. And again, the seahorse. So this is quite a good example of how to wrap the frame. So these participants have used a batik type fabric, which complements the colour of their chosen threads really very well. So there's quite a bit in the course as well about choosing a colour scheme and then choosing complementary fabrics that are going to enhance your piece of work. This one was done fairly recently. This was done at a school in London, literally last Friday, by a student who wanted to make some ivy leaves. So you can see that she's cut those out separately, and then she's used some pipe cleaners to create the stems and the twigs that the ivy is going to be shown on. And then these are a couple showing different elements. And I think this was one that I put together, which isn't actually completed yet, but it just shows you some of the elements that you can include. And then this one was by an adult participant, I think. But it's surprising how different the results can be. So this one, this participant has chosen to wrap this very fluffy wool around the border to create a kind of, it's almost like a seaweed effect. And then this is funky foam, which has been cut out to create these seaweed shapes. I always bring along some kind of contextual information as well. So the seaweed here, for example, is based on some Matisse image. I think it's called Polynesia, the Sea. And if you're wanting the students to refer to art history, then I try and provide things for you that will enable you to add that kind of contextual element. You can see here there's some seaweed which hasn't been treated yet with anything. It's just the plain pink. But also there is some fabric manipulation. So I've got some chiffon here, which I've zapped with a heat gun, and that gives you a very interesting kind of crinkled effect, which looks like seaweed. And also there's a different type of fabric, which is this one, which I can probably show you an example of. And this fabric, because of the way it's constructed, when you actually come to heat it with the heat gun, it actually splits out into long strands that again looks quite like seaweed. And then you can see here the strings of lights, which can be added later on. So these are the techniques that I'm going to be covering. I'll just move that up to the top. So as I say, it's small worlds, so there'll be layering and fusing of the fabric to create a piece that we're going to stitch onto. We'll be outlining the piece with free machine embroidery, and we'll be thread painting. We'll be using the fabric manipulation, including the heat gun techniques. There'll be some information about composition, so you'll be placing your pieces in different positions, photographing them and deciding how best you can display them. We'll be looking at embellishments, so sequins beads, might do a bit of shibori on there as well. Talking about colour schemes, so how you can either contrast or blend colours together, and there'll be lots of different media that we're going to be using. So that covers the presentation in terms of the PowerPoint. So what I want to do now is to move over just to show you some techniques in terms of things you can do and how you can use the fused fabric. So I'm just going to switch the camera to my webcam. Right, and I just need to pin that so I can see that. Okay. Right, so this is a piece of fused fabric which I prepared earlier, as they say. It's a layering technique which I'll explain to you more on the course, but I just wanted to show you the types of fabric. So this is the fabric which, when you heat it, creates the long, thin strands. So I'm using for this piece of fabric, I've used quite iridescent colours. I've used some chiffons, and when these are all layered up, you get quite an interesting effect. These are all layered up onto a piece of felt, and then I fuse that together with a soldering iron. And then, of course, what you'll be doing is choosing a template. So for this demonstration, I've chosen to do the frog. So what you'll do is you pin it. So obviously you make sure your fabric is the right sort of size. This one I've gone for pinks and greens. And then I'm going to move over to my sewing machine. I'll just have to see if I can set that up so you can actually see it. If I just bring that down to the bottom, again, I'm going to be able to do that. Okay. Right. It's quite tricky to actually get the machine in the right place here. If I put the light on, it tends to give a bit too much glare, so I'm going to take that off. So essentially what you do first of all is you take your fabric, you put it under the needle. I'm just going to see if I can get this in a slightly better place. Can you see the machine now? Is that okay? Yeah. So I'm just going to have a look to see where my foot is. And you start with a dark thread, both on the top of the machine and on the bobbin, because obviously if you're stitching from the back, the thread that's on the bobbin is going to be the thread that you will see on the top or on the coloured side of the fabric. So you start by stitching all the way around. You notice I'm not taking the needle out when I come to a different shape, because this is just the first layer of thread. Later on in the project, you'll be outlining this again. So at the moment, you can just keep the needle going. You don't need to remove it and put it on a different piece of fabric. I'm just going to concentrate just on the head. I'm not going to go all the way around it because we haven't got time for that. Take the pins out as we go along. So what you need to do is make sure that the thread is dark enough to show up on this side. If you're doing this with students, you've got to make sure that they don't have a pale colour, because then when they turn it round, they actually can't see what they're doing. So make sure that it's going to be visible. I'm using a very dark blue on here. Black can sometimes be a little bit too overbearing, so I tend to favour pale blue, but equally dark blue, sorry, but equally it could be a dark green on there as well. I'm going to be using a safety eye on here, so I don't need to concentrate too much on anything around the eye other than just outlining it. So it isn't a very precise method. It's not like making a garment where you've got to be spot on with seams and things like that. It's quite nice if it has a kind of sketchy look to it, so it's a little bit less formal, if you like. That's just a little bit more, and then I'll turn it over. Okay, so if I just take that off, so as I said, it's very good for people who might not be as keen on sketching, so they can simply just stitch on the back. Okay, so you end up with a stitched line like that. Now I'm having to be quite quick with this to try and show you, but you can see how you get really quite a nice feel to the line there. So what I'm going to do now is change colour, which means changing both the thread on the bobbin and also on the top, because I don't want to have any very dark thread coming through from the base. So I'm going to change to an orange. I've got all these ready previously. So putting an orange on the bobbin, and also I'll just have to rethread the machine as well. So hopefully it'll behave itself and not let me down. This thread painting or stitching does take quite a long time, so it's going to take probably a couple of hours to complete the whole thing, or possibly even more. It depends how much you want to stitch it, but you know, I can only just give you a quick kind of taster of how it could look, and I'm going to show you the safety eyes as well, which make a huge difference. Right, please thread through. Okay, the safety eyes are from Amazon. It's much better to buy them in bulk than just buy them, you know, single pairs, if you like. So I've got that through. Now, because the frog is got quite a rough texture, I'm going to put the stitching on. Just show you the kind of motion. I'm going to put the stitching on in a kind of circular motion like that. So whereas when I showed you the tulips, they had quite smooth leaves, so I was stitching along a smooth straight line. This one you can actually have a little bit more of a textured feel. I can see there's some questions coming up. Usually you can't really do this very effectively unless you've got a free machine foot, because obviously you need to be able to maneuver it. I did a workshop yesterday with some Year 9 students who hadn't actually done much free machine embroidery, and it was surprising how they picked it up quite quickly. Just see, can you see that? Okay, so I'm going to foot sorted out here, so I'm a bit tangled up. So the colours I'm going to be using, I won't get to use them all now, but I've chosen a range of quite warm colours. So I'm going for a kind of poison tree frog kind of look with this. So I'm actually stitching just on the body, not on the blotches on the frog, but just on the remainder of the body. So you can see that, yeah. Is it better with the light on or not? Let me just have a look. Let me see. No, definitely not, because it's too reflective actually, so you can't see it quite so well. I'm aware of having to try to do this really quite quickly, so. Okay, just show you. Okay, so I'll just show you on the back how that stitching is going. Initially, it looks quite scribbly. So the idea is that you keep adding colour, and then when you've added as much colour as you like, then you actually go over those outlines again. The trick is not to go over too much of the fabric, because clearly you've spent quite a bit of time layering this fabric up, so you want some of those colours to come through. And I always try to use some shimmery fabric, because when you turn the piece from one side to another, you get that shimmer coming through. So I'm just going to put a lemony yellow on now. I'm going to leave that orange in the bottom. I just want to try and create a bit of contrast. And then I might just simply do the outlining again and then show you how to fit the eye, because you've seen quite a few examples on the presentation. So I'm sure you know what the finished thing would look like. So I'll just do a little bit of yellow. I think I'm going to leave the insides of the splodges on the back of the frog actually the fabric that's showing through, so I'm not going to put any stitching on there. I've got tangled up here, just bear with me. It's always tricky doing the sewing machine demonstration, because you're relying on the machine working or behaving itself, which isn't always the case.
Nikki, for some reason you're on mute.
Oh, right. Am I, can you hear me now?
You're there now, yeah.
How strange, I've not touched anything. That's odd. Sorry, I hope you've not missed too much.
No, I don't think it was very long. Okay,
so I'm just, as I say, I'm just going back to the darker blue now. So this process of filling in, I would expect to take quite some time, obviously, but I'm just giving you a flavour of what you can do. So let me just trim the end of this so I can show you.
We've got about 10 minutes left, just so that you know.
That's fine, yeah, I shan't be long. Is it easier if I just put the eye in now and show you that? And I think you've probably seen quite a lot of them finished, haven't you? So,
Yeah.
so as I say, this would have a much heavier stitching around here. Just quickly show you the eye then, and then I'll have to take some questions. So these are from Amazon, as I say, and I've gone for a nice big red eye. What I usually do is use some funky foam to create a kind of an outline for the eye. So what I'm going to do is take the piece of foam, put a hole through it, and put the eye through. And then just trim around that so that there's a couple of millimeters border around the edge. You can get these in all sorts of different colours. You can get green, blue, yellow, brown, clear, red, obviously. So you cut around that, and then I'm going to take another piece again. I'm being quite quick with this, so it's not the tidiest. So put it through again there, go around that. Again, I'll do it more carefully if I had a bit more time. And then you simply get a very sharp pair of scissors, because this fabric, once you've fused it together, is really quite strong. So you've got to be careful if you're doing this with the students. I tend to do it for them to prevent them from injuring themselves. And then you just simply push that post through. So it's just quite tough. So that's pushed through. So you start to get the idea of that all coming together. So as I say, the final thing when you've done all of this stitching, the coloured stitching, is to go around the border again, go around all of the outlines, cut it out, and then you pad it and you stuff it. And then that's when you start to think about how you're going to display it within some kind of a frame. Okay. Right, I'll switch back to me then, and I will take questions if you'd like to ask any questions.
There's lots of questions in the chat.
Are there? Does anyone want to speak any questions? Does anyone want to ask a question? Or shall I look in the chat? Oh my goodness, there are 30 questions in the chat. I can't answer 30 questions. Right, okay. Wowie, thank you. What else? Let's have a look.
So one of them was, is there any issue with fumes when fusing fabric purely from a school environment, health and safety perspective? Somebody has that with a risk assessment.
Yes, there is. Yeah. So I always do this by a well-ventilated window and get the students to stand away from me. So you can use a mask as well if you want to, but you've got to be somewhere where there's plenty of ventilation. So if there's anyone with asthma or anything like that, it's probably as well to check.
Somebody else is saying that they want to use more sustainable approach, so recycling poly pockets. Could you use poly pockets?
Yes, you could do. Yeah, the trouble with those is they're not quite as thick, so they're a bit crinkly. You can, if you get something like I don't know, a duvet or something. If it comes in a plasticky soft casing, then you can recycle plastics. Yes, that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
Have another look. Somebody's saying, are you using a Benino 1008?
Yes, I am. Yes. I like this because they're very simple. There aren't any strange, computerized things. So these are very good.
Nikki, could I ask, when you say you stuff it, is it with normal wadding or something else when you pad it out?
No, it's just normal wadding. Just normal.
Okay, so and then do you back it with some felt or something?
Yeah.
Or...
So you cut this out, take a piece of felt a similar size, pin it on, And then in the instance of the frog, because it's quite a complicated shape, I would sew all the way around it and then just leave that back open.
Yeah.
Then you can stuff into all of the areas there. So yes, you do pad it. And the same if you're doing the plastic one, you would still pad that as well, but not a butterfly, because you wouldn't want to pad a butterfly.
Thank you.
Shiny fabric, the iridescent fabric. These are chiffons and organzas. I think this might be called crystal organza, actually. That's possible. And this comes in all sorts of lovely pale pinks and lilacs and that sort of thing. I'm trying to see what else. How do you reduce the PVC, the friction? You'll find when you're sewing with PVC on the sewing machine that there's no friction at all. It's very easy to do. In fact, it's slightly easier than fabric because there's nothing to pull. There aren't any threads that are going to catch or anything like that. Iridescent fabric, you can probably look at it just on the internet if you look at crystal organza. The cellophane, that's from Amazon, and you look at iridescent cellophane and you should be able to get rolls of that. And likewise, you can get florist's cellophane, which has got patterns and dots and things on it like that. Right, any more that anyone wants?
You know how somebody asked about the friction? You know
Yeah.
how with denim you'd use a different needle and thread and stuff, ideally on the machine. Do you use anything different for the PVC because it's tougher to go through? Or
well, it isn't really. It's very easy to go through. I use a 90 something or a jeans needle.
okay, so if I put a jeans needle in, they should be okay, shouldn't they?
Yes. Right. Somebody said about using a hoop. I've been in a lot of schools, and in only one of them have they wanted the students to use a hoop. So I suppose it depends on what your students are able to do. The thing about this fabric is it's very stable. It's not like stitching on calico, which can kind of scrunch up. This you can, because it's got paper on the back as well. It's very firm. But obviously, if necessary, you'd have to put on a large piece of fabric and then put it in a hoop if that was necessary.
I think it's more about the safety of students getting their fingers.
Yes,
caught.
yeah, of course, yeah.
Because there's no guard or anything, so.
Right, okay.
Somebody's asking what the shiny fabric is called, the iridescent one.
Yeah, I think that's the crystal organza. That's the one I just showed you here, this one. But
if anyone's in the West Midlands, I bought some of that for my students last weekend from the rag market in Birmingham for 50p a metre.
Wow, so, that's a bargain.
Go down to the 50p, man.
Because I normally pay about £3 a metre probably. And then I use a lot of this chiffon, so I tend to use synthetic sheer fabrics. So then if you layer them, you get the colours coming through. So if you layer these up, you get some lovely colour effects. Are there any more things? Is there anything else that, because I can't actually see all of I'm kind of scrolling through. Is there anything anybody else wants to ask that I haven't covered?
I think we're nearly there, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Just a reminder that Nikki's workshop is in Cranley, and it's on the Saturday, 2nd of March. And she's going to cover all this and more, and you'll be able to have a go at doing all of this. And she's doing lots of other things as well, not just what we're looking at here. So if it's something that you think will be useful for your students, I think it's definitely worth coming along to the workshop. Has anybody else got any more questions before we go? No? Thank you so much, Nikki. That was really, really, really interesting. And some lovely work, really lovely work. You must have such patience, especially with those huge pieces that you've done. Yeah. They're just incredible. A really, really enjoyable session, I have to say. And yes, it's been recorded, so if you want to watch it again, or if you know people who haven't been able to make it, they can I'll be uploading it tomorrow, hopefully, onto the YouTube channel. Thank you again. So thank you very much, everybody. See you again
Right, yes,
next
thank you.
week.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you.